And we are live, live in color here on the Sports Talk Nation here on YouTube. Welcome aboard, folks, to the Open Mic Podcast here. Michael Cohen here with you. On this edition of the podcast, we're going to talk about the miserable New York Mets. Unfortunately for the Mets, it has been a miserable time of late. After an 11-1 start to the season, the Mets have now lost 18 of their last 25, and right now find themselves just one game over 500 at 20-19. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Bad pitching, bad performances out of the bullpen, Mickey Callaway mismanaging the bullpen at times this year, and of course, a plethora of injuries all over this offense as the Mets have been one of the worst offenses in baseball. Joining me today to talk about all of this is the editor of the Mets Amazing Clubhouse on 24/7 Sports, and that is the one, the only, Rick Laughland. Rick, how you doing, man?
Doing well. And yeah, I mean, again, I think the media is kind of overstating what's happening to the Mets right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, after that hot start, that 11-1 stretch, there's no way they're going to keep up that pace for the rest of the season. We even expressed some concerns over how Mickey Callaway was managing that bullpen. It was just not a model that was going to last over the course of a 162-game season. And of course, from what we've seen, is the lineup underperforming. Mm-hmm. Of course, the Matt Harvey trade, which was a long time coming. I mean, look, the eventual parting of the ways between Harvey and the organization was just a matter of when, not if. And with him due to be a free agent, the fact they were able to get Devin Mesoraco, who can be an everyday catcher if he's healthy and in the lineup, I think that was tremendous for them just to get not only Harvey as a distraction, but his ego out of the clubhouse. Because, again, when he was a top-flight pitcher back in the 2013 season, of course, pitching in the All-Star game that was hosted at Citi Field, you put up with a lot of the off-the-field shenanigans. But now, after several surgeries, with some of the distractions that he brought to the team and really not happy and not embracing that role that Mickey Callaway gave him an opportunity in the bullpen, mm-hmm. and not doing well in that role and then not accepting a demotion. I mean, it was time, and this was probably a year or two overdue in my estimation. They maybe could have gotten a little more in return for him before he started this downward spiral the past couple of years. Mm-hmm. But, for me, I'm looking at this team, and you're seeing now they had the back page of the New York Post, I believe it was Syndergaard and DeGrom shoulder to shoulder standing in the Yankee uniform saying that it could be time for the Mets to trade both their aces, and the Yankees would be a great trading partner. Yeah. I'm not going to go that far. I don't think that fans should throw the towel in, especially with this game, mm-hmm. this team one game over 500. But for me, again, what I've seen over the past 15 to 20 games, it's definitely alarming and disconcerting. And Mickey Callaway, as a first-year manager, has to figure out how to get this lineup combination so they're producing runs on a game-in, game-out basis, because they've gone through some serious offensive dry spells. Yeah,
and there are a lot of good points you just brought up there. Now, the people pinning the panic button, and a lot of this started with, ironically, Mike Francesa coming back on the air, and he just has gone on a complete tour of trying to tear apart the Mets on every second he gets. I mean, he bashes Mickey Callaway, he bashes every player in the team, and then it's just everyone else has just kind of followed suit in this bash fest of the New York Mets. Now, yes, it has been some bad baseball that we have seen here for 25-plus games. They aren't hitting. There are a lot of reasons for that. Injuries, players ending up on paternity leave, i.e. Jay Bruce and Jerry Blevins. So there's a lot of different reasons for why the Mets have been struggling so bad. But to sit here and say that on May the 18th that the season is over, I just don't think that's fair. Now, if we're sitting here in 3 months, 2 months for that matter, and it's July the 18th and the Mets are a game over 500 and 8 or 9 back, okay, you want to consider selling some pieces off, trying to find some way to get some prospects, go right ahead. But it's May the 18th. You still got a lot of season to go. The Mets are only 3 back of the wild card, 4 back in their division. Yes, I know that Atlanta's playing well and Philadelphia's been playing well. Eventually, Washington's probably going to catch both of those teams and surpass both of them. But I'm not going to sit here and say in a weak National League where the team that has the best record is an Arizona team that, oh, by the way, is also coming in here limping into Citi Field this weekend. I can't sit here and say the Mets are out of it here on May 18th. It's just not fair.
And I'll say a couple words about Mike Francesa, who...
Put my mic on!
Let's face it, I mean, this is a guy that was taking bows and standing ovations and having a retirement tour, much like a Derek Jeter or a Kobe Bryant. And for him to come, essentially, with his tail between his legs, come crawling back to WFAN when all of the weeks leading up to his announcement that he was retiring was that he was going to be doing big things and he was still going to be staying in the business. Obviously, none of that panned out. So we know where Mike Francesa stands as far as his Yankee fandom, and of course bashing the Mets. So that hasn't changed in his 35+ years hosting, I should say, on WFAN. And frankly, I've probably heard a soundbite or two since he's rejoined the station, but I lost a lot of respect for a guy that had everybody essentially giving him a farewell and signing off, and then coming back, and not only coming back but pushing out a trio of Maggie Gray as well as Bart Scott and Chris Carlin, who had changed their career paths and come together in order to try to host an afternoon drive show, and now shortening their time on the air. I mean, I thought it was a pretty selfish act, but frankly, I'm not surprised. I mean, Mike Francesa is all about Mike Francesa. He's only going to do what's in the best interest for him. And he, to me, is always been a Met detractor, despite his wife actually being a fan of the Mets. So for me, it's funny because, this is a long season. I mean, a lot can change. We've seen over the course of the first 40 games how things have changed drastically from the first 12 games of the season. So I think the Mets still have to keep their options open. I mean, they've had some bizarre instances with Jay Bruce going on the paternity list, Jerry Blevins going on the paternity list, now coming back because Juan Lagares heads to the DL. Of course, Yoenis Cespedes now with that quad issue is on the DL. So, you have a lot of guys that are everyday players that are underperforming in the lineup. And you have DeGrom, who's really been the steadying presence in that rotation. And Syndergaard, has he pitched well? I think he has, but he's only gone into the seventh inning, I believe, once so far this year. He hasn't shown essentially that he has a lot of that stamina from these past seasons. So in my mind, I'm in agreement with you, Michael. I'd like to see the next sample size, the next 15 to 20 games as the calendar starts to turn to June and mid-June. And then you can start looking at the trading deadline, seeing where the Mets are. But right now, I believe you look at the standings 4.5 games out, within striking distance, an important series now against the Arizona Diamondbacks. They are very much alive in this playoff race. I think what really hurts Met fans is the season started with so much promise, and then it seemed like the bottom fell out from under the team just at the drop of a hat. But there's still a lot of baseball left, so hopefully Mickey Callaway can recapture some of that magic he had over the first 2 weeks of his managerial career with the Mets.
Well, here's what I will say. About Noah Syndergaard. I have a lot of concerns about him. Now, Dave Island came out last week, and he said that, he doesn't buy into the hype around Noah Syndergaard. He doesn't know what's been going on with this guy for the last 2.5 years, why everyone's so high on him. And look, I understand that Island just got here. He's just getting to know a lot of these pitchers. But, let's just take a look at the body of work here by Noah Syndergaard this year, and hasn't been that impressive. Now, yes, he hasn't been blown out, but, here's a guy who's expected to go 7, 8 innings, be a dominant ace for this team, and it hasn't happened this year. He's throwing, almost 95 to 100 pitches a start, and that's just in the first 5 innings. He's had a lot of trouble getting out of the 5th inning in these games. He's walking guys. His fastball has no zip to it, and people are making contact on his fastball. So there are a lot of concerns for me with Noah Syndergaard. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's going to be an automatic trade bait now because of what the Mets did with Matt Harvey and going out there and getting rid of a guy who was a personality. I will say this: the days of this being the Mets' vaunted rotation is kind of going the way of Generation K. It just didn't work out. I think we just have to accept that this group of pitching hasn't lived up to the hype that we all expected. But I still think Noah Syndergaard can be a very good pitcher in this league. He just has not learned how to pitch. Here's a guy who throws 102 miles an hour, and he has not figured out how to pitch and get outs and pitch to contact. And as soon as he learns how to do that, you're going to see him start to extend these outings a little bit more, get that pitch count down. We see that with Jacob deGrom. Now, I know deGrom's last outing, we saw it, 45 pitches in the first inning in his first start off the DL. But this is a guy who, generally speaking, always finds ways to work around hitters, work around stuff where he doesn't have great stuff, and get through innings. And that's what Syndergaard has not learned at this point in his career.
And I know that was going back to even the 2013, 2014 seasons when I had felt that Jacob deGrom was the purest pitcher on the Mets staff, and really of all the top prospects and top starters, the most indispensable, just because of some of the things you had mentioned. I mean, there are days when he trots out to the mound. What is the old saying? If you make 30 starts, 10 you're fantastic, 10 you're terrible, and the other 10 you're pretty much going to be average, and you're going to have to kind of fight your way through innings. And deGrom has shown that. I mean, he can blow the fastball by you at 98 to 99 miles an hour, but he can also paint with the corners. He understands the position. And for a guy that came out of Stetson as a highly touted shortstop, and to make that transition to pitcher and just to master the art of pitching the way he has is just fantastic. And I have some of those same concerns about Syndergaard. I mean, the guy is an absolute fireballer when he goes out there, but I mean, is he really looking to rack up the strikeouts? Is that more important than going into the 7th and 8th inning with a lead and trying to serve as that bridge to Familia? I think Syndergaard is still going through that period where he's just trying to blow batters away instead of not being afraid to pitch to contact. I mean, there were games, I think he was taken out in the 5th inning earlier in the year and he had 10 strikeouts, which is all great and well, but the Mets would go on to actually lose that game. So, he's still a young player trying to find his way and understand all the nuances of the game and understanding not just the immediate gratification of piling up these strikeouts when really wins and quality starts are the more important statistic that he should paying closer attention to. And for me, again, I don't think they're going to ultimately trade either one of these guys, even if the Mets lose 30 out of the next 40 games. They're still going to be key components of the future of 2019 and beyond. And now that you have Matt Harvey out of the picture, just another guy that was going to potentially command, a big salary heading into free agency, these two guys have to be the priority to lock them up at the top of the rotation because, they've, even though Syndergaard has probably performed below expectations and DeGrom has been that steadying presence, it's really been the 3 through 5 starters that you don't know what you're going to get. Whether
it's been terrible.
It's Vargas. I mean, just Vargas is a guy that when he goes out there, you're thinking he might not even make it out of the first inning.
I don't even know why they signed him. I mean,
it's one good start, one bad start.
I don't even know why they signed Vargas. It makes no sense to me at all. I mean, when they announced that they were going to bring in Jason Vargas, I'm like, why? Because you got Alex Cobb out there, you had Lance Lynn out there. Now, I don't know what those guys are asking for, but still.
And you bumped Zach Wheeler out of a spot, too. During spring training, he was going to be slated to be the 5th starter, and then you bump him out of the rotation. So, he's been more harm than good so far, Jason Vargas, in his short Met career. But to me, that's going to be the key for this Met team is Mickey Callaway finding that lineup combination to produce some runs. I mean, they can't be getting shut out 3 out of 4 games as they did during this rough patch they had over the past couple of weeks. They need to put runs on the board, but also you need to have some kind of steady, reliable 3rd, 4th, and 5th starters to throw out there. And I don't care whether they threw a lot of money at Jason Vargas in free agency. If he's not producing, they got to find somebody else that does.
Yeah, they really do. And, part of the problem is, and this is going to transition into one of my main points, the big problem for this team, other than the fact they've had all these injuries offensively and no Jonas Cespedes in the lineup, which doesn't help, but this is all about Sandy Alderson and the Wilpons. And, Sandy Alderson has not done a great job in restocking this minor league system. A lot of these guys that were on the farm when this team went to the World Series a couple of years ago, these are a lot of guys that, I hate to say this, and I know a lot of Met fans don't like hearing this name, but guys like Matt Harvey, Jacob deGrom, they were all Omar guys. They're all brought in through Omar Minaya. So, you sit there and say, okay, outside of Ahmed Rosario, who has been a slight disappointment so far in my mind, who has Sandy Alderson brought up here through the minor league system? That's been a problem for the Mets certainly this year and even last year for that matter. The warts are starting to show now. And also the Wilpons on just continued stubbornness to spend any kind of money, any kind of substantial money to improve this team on the field. And you go with very cheap contracts, 1-2-year deals. Now, I know Todd Frazier, Adrian Gonzalez, they were at one point really good players, but at this point in their careers, you're not going to get a whole heck of a lot out of them at ages 34, 35, 36 for that matter. So if you're going to be a competitive team, if you're going to be a playoff team, you got to spend some money, and that's what the Wilpons just continue to refuse to do.
And for me, Omar Minaya, it's funny because Terry Collins now is within the Mets front office, so he's still very much active in the organization and has his fingerprints on this team, even despite leaving after last year. And Omar Minaya, too, he's part of the organization. I believe he's a special assistant to Sandy Alderson. So I think that this Mets front office, this new regime, had seen that Minaya and his staff, what they did for the minor league system. I mean, J.P. Ricciardi was a key component of that, of retooling the farm system. And, yeah, you just look at probably 2 to 3 years ago, and the Mets had one of the most highly touted and fruitful minor league systems throughout the whole major leagues. And now it seems like that's been completely depleted, whether they've focused on recruiting big free agents and kind of taken their eye off the ball as far as seeing what else is coming down the pipeline. I mean, you look at one of their top prospects in Dominic Smith. I mean, he hasn't shown you a heck of a lot. To me, it's pretty telling that you have Adrian Gonzalez that 35 years old, a guy that's basically should be relegated to bench duties and maybe spot pinch hitting, has been an everyday first baseman for the Mets. I mean, that just shows you what they think of Dominic Smith, and that he's really not ready to become that heir apparent at first base. So aside from that, I mean, they really haven't had many pitchers that could come in and fill in for some of their injured staff. And I think that is something you can point to, and it's an indictment on Sandy Alderson and this current regime, that essentially you had one of the top minor league prospect bases in the entire league, and all of a sudden 2 or 3 years later, now you're probably in the bottom third, if not one of the worst in the league. I'm not sure how that happens, especially when you have the quality assets that they had. And that leads me back to my point about Matt Harvey. I felt you could see the writing on the wall with a guy that just wasn't happy with his role in the team, and injuries piling up. They should have traded him 2 years ago, and they could have, even if you don't get any immediate impact players, you could have restocked that farm system and set this team up for some success, for future success, as opposed to now they find themselves in a pretty precarious situation where you might have to unload a Jacob deGrom or Noah Syndergaard to get anything worthwhile that would be a prospect that would help this team in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and you know what? They need a lot of these guys to step it up. I mean, you need guys like Rosario. You need Frazier when he gets back, Bruce when he gets back. You need these guys to start producing, not just from the win-loss standpoint, but if the Mets are going to be able to go out there and trade some pieces and get something for these guys got to produce. I mean, Jay Bruce hitting, 232, 3 home runs, 14 RBIs. No one's going to want that. You know, Todd Frazier hitting 237. No one's going to want that. Even Yoenis Cespedes. And look, I know Cespedes is a valuable piece of this organization over the last few years, but you know what? The Mets he needs to stay healthy. He needs to show he can stay healthy for a long period of time. And instead, he has one leg injury after another. He's got to stay healthy because, hey, look, if we're sitting here in July and the Mets are indeed out of it and they want to sell, maybe somebody they can get something for Yoenis Cespedes or a Todd Frazier down the road if they stay healthy and produce.
And this was a season that Cespedes said he wanted to be an MVP caliber player again, much like he was at the end of the 2015 season. Of course, he carried them through that regular season to a division title and an eventual World Series berth, and for parts of the 2016 season. And he even changed a lot of his off-season regimen. He said that he was doing too much weight training, building up muscles, squatting 1,000 pounds, and he tried to implement yoga and Pilates and some other exercises that are going to counter some of that strength training, and it just hasn't done the trick. He's still battled leg and quad injuries, and he seems like a guy that unfortunately is going to have chronic leg problems, and as he gets towards the back nine of his career, it's probably not going to get better. It's probably going to get worse before it gets any better. So this is a Met team, that's as it seems as Cespedes goes, that's how the Mets go. When he had his virtuoso performances in 2015 and 2016, he basically took the team on his back and carried them in the middle of that lineup. And when he seems to struggle and hit these slumps is when the team can't sustain losing him either to injury or to poor performance. So he is very much, I would argue, the most important player in this Mets lineup, and if not this team, to get him going. And I thought it was a smart move by them putting him in on the DL. He was there. You could tell just watching him patrol the outfield that he was really favoring his leg and just not 100%. So throw him out there, even if it's 80, 85%, and he's just doing more damage than good, that's going to hurt you in the long run. So I think finally the Mets made a wise decision health-wise and let Cespedes sit down and hit the 10-day DL and hopefully come back and shake this injury and get back healthy on the field.
You hope so. And, speaking of rushing players back from injury, I sit there and I watch this team and I wonder how much injuries from last year are lingering into this year. I look at Michael Conforto. I mean, we need to put a PBI out for Michael Conforto because he is missing in action. He is MIA so far through 30 games of the year. Syndergaard, we talked about Syndergaard and the fact that he's having a hard time with extending himself and the high pitch count. And I sit there and I wonder, the injuries that these guys suffered from last year, are they still lingering? In the case of Conforto, he kind of came back quickly, maybe well ahead, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ahead of schedule from spring training. Didn't even participate in any spring training games or even rehab games for that matter before he was activated. I wonder, are the Mets rushing guys back a little bit too soon? That's been a topic of discussion lately.
You thought when they made wholesale changes that they showed Ray Ramirez the door and made so many changes as far as the strength and conditioning program was concerned, the training staff evaluating players, trying to use more forward techniques, whether it be yoga or implementing Fitbits that are doing heart monitors and tracking players' dehydration levels. I mean, they implemented all of this into spring training and into the team's workout, and you would think that they would be extra cautious and maybe a little bit conservative with some of these players' injuries, given the fact that, look, I can understand if it's an NFL season, if you have a guy that's going to miss, potentially 8 games, but you could maybe rush him back and he'll miss only 4. I get that, because instead of missing half the season, you miss a quarter of the season. But if Conforto would have come back after 25 games, 30 games, as opposed to right at the beginning of the season, I don't think that would have had as a dramatic impact as the Met front office and maybe the training staff was led to believe. And I know Conforto was very anxious to play. He's a young player, of course. He doesn't really think beyond this season. So if they were smart about it, they should have made sure that he was 100% healthy and there were no problems. But unfortunately, I think a lot of the problems that plagued the old Mets training staff led by Ray Ramirez seem to be cropping up again as far as getting players back onto the field prematurely before they've 100% healed from injuries. And yeah, sometimes they'll get away with it, but more times than not, you'll see that with Yoenis Cespedes. You mentioned Michael Conforto.
Yeah.
I see these as lingering problems that are really, they're going to have to battle throughout the full season. So instead of resting and missing 20 games and being 100%, they rush back and they're probably 75 to 80%, and that's hurting their long-term health, and it's hurting the team in the short run and long run.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a lot of problems right now for the Mets, and they open up a series this week against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Can the Mets win more than one game, let alone string together 2 wins in a row? We have not seen the Mets win 2 straight games or string wins together since April the 13th, and that's when they advanced to 11-1. As we said, they have been 7-18 since that point. It's been very, very frustrating for this team as they have been slip sliding in the standings, yet still find themselves a game over 500. This is a must series. Not only is this a must series, but I look at this as a golden opportunity, Rick, because they get Miami after this series. This is a chance for them, if they can find a way to even get 2 games here against a good Arizona team, and then find a way to get healthy against Miami. They can go into that road trip against Milwaukee and Atlanta feeling a little bit better about themselves than they do right now. But this is a must series against a good team.
And it's confusing to me. I mean, this is a Met team that's 12-8 on the road, 8-11 at home in the friendly confines of Citi Field. And maybe some of that could be the fact that, those games in April and even early May, I mean, finally we've seen in the Northeast here with the weather warming up into the 60s and 70s, but there were so many games at Citi Field that I was there personally, I know you were there too, 40 degrees, 50 degrees, I mean, just not ideal baseball weather. So I'm not going to say that was a major contributing factor to why the Mets are under 500, but this is a pivotal series to reestablish, a home field advantage. I mean, to go 0-6 on that last homestand, I mean, that's absolutely embarrassing. I mean, the Mets hadn't done that. They had said for, I think, about 10 years was the last time they did it. So for me, this is a Met team. You're back home. You're playing an Arizona Diamondback team that, again, they're at 25-18, leading the NL West. They're a team that seems to every year sneak up into those standings and grab a wild card spot. And they have a clearly MVP caliber player in Paul Goldschmidt. So if this was ever a time for the Mets to jumpstart their team, try to string together some victories, I agree with you. If they're able to take 2 out of 3, or dare I say they sweep the Arizona Diamondbacks and they head into a series against the Miami Marlins, that is an opportunity where maybe you could win, 5 out of 6 games, or you could just string together 3 or 4 wins at a time just to get the confidence going and to get this team back on the right track. Because, I've experienced a lot of Mets seasons over the years, good, bad, and ugly. And this is one of the most confusing that I've experienced, because at 11-1, this team looked like they could win 115 games, and then a week later, they're just mired in mediocrity, falling fast towards 500. So they have to establish some kind of consistency, and that has to start now. Otherwise, we could be having a Sandy Alderson fire sale right before the trading deadline.
Or maybe a Sandy Alderson firing, for that matter, if this keeps up. That's possible, too.
Anything is possible with this team, unfortunately.
Anything. That's the life of the Mets. So, Rick, I want to thank you, man, for coming on for a little bit here, talking a little bit about the New York Mets. Again, you can follow Rick right on with the Mets Amazing Clubhouse, 24/7 Sports, and also follow him on Twitter at Rick Laughland. Rick, thanks, man.
Always fun. Thanks, Michael.
All right, take care. All right, folks, that's Rick Laughland from the Mets Amazing Clubhouse. And again, the Mets right now are free-falling here in the month of May. They right now, as I said, stand only a game over 500. They are 20-19. Should the Mets consider having a fire sale? Should the Mets consider tearing this team apart and blowing things up now? Like I said, it's a little bit early to consider blowing the team up at this point. It's only, May the 18th. But if this continues, this is going to be a rough series here against Arizona. And if this continues for a while here, because after this homestand ends against Miami and Arizona, the Mets will go to Milwaukee for 4, to Atlanta for 4, which includes a doubleheader for a makeup game from earlier in the year. Then they get the Cubs coming into town at the end of May, beginning of June. Then they get a bit of a respite for 2 days against the Orioles, and then the Yankees come in here June 8th, 9th, and 10th. It's not going to be fun. So you're talking right here from right now, May the 18th through June the 10th, okay? In fact, June the 10th, and if you want to look even beyond that, it's really scary. There are not many bad teams that the Mets face. The Mets playing a playoff potential team here in Arizona, a playoff caliber team in Milwaukee, playoff caliber team in Atlanta, a Cubs team that, yes, kind of like the Mets is teetering on the brink here, but we know what they're capable of. And they have a lot of good young players. They have to find a way to turn their season around. They get the Cubs, the Yankees, who have been absolutely a monster, and we're going to do a big show on them. We tried to do a show, but then because of work and everything, the show got kind of dated quickly. But we're going to do the Yankees again on another show with either Karen or Doug. We'll do that certainly within the next week. But the Yankees have been an absolute freight train, and the Mets and Yankees will face June 8th, 9th, and 10th at Citi Field. Then the Mets get the Braves again, they get Arizona again, they get Colorado again, they get the Dodgers for the first time, and the Pirates. All teams that are playoff caliber teams right now, and all teams that are in a good position to be a playoff contending team come the later part of the year. So this is I'll say it. This is a murderer's row right now for the Mets. This is must be for the Mets right now, because if we're sitting here a month from now, on June the 18th. And the Mets are on their way to Colorado, and this team is 3 or 4 games under 500, 7 or 8 games out of first place. And whether that be in the division or the wild card, you have to start to consider what you want to do with this team moving forward. Whether it be moving players, trading players, hoping that you can get something for a couple of players, hoping that you can get some good performances before the July 31st trade deadline. But it's getting scary right now for the Mets. It really is. And right now, this team still has a chance. They still have a chance. They're game over 500. They're at home tonight against Arizona. They have Miami coming in after that. They have to take it. They have to take it one game at a time here. And I hate to say that it's cliche, but they have to take it one game at a time and find a way to withstand all the problems they have here and keep themselves in the mix. And if the Mets are going to keep themselves in the mix, they have to be bold. And I'm talking to the Wilpons here, and I'm talking to Sandy Alderson, have to be bold and be willing to improve this team if it really wants to, if they really believe that this team can go out there and compete in this division. Okay? Go out there and make a big move. Go out there and make a move that's going to change the face of this franchise. Change the face of this offense, which is putrid. Right now, 13th in the National League in runs scored with 166. One of the worst teams in batting average in the National League, let alone Major League Baseball. They have got to change the face of this franchise if they want to have any kind of chance whatsoever to be competitive. Meanwhile, across town, the New York Yankees, as I said, continue to rock, continue to roll. They are 28-12. They're going into Kansas City, are the Yankees, this weekend, and they're going up against the Kansas City team that is far and away from the Kansas City team that we had gotten used to seeing for a couple of years, that had won a World Series a couple of years ago. This Kansas City team is on the rebuild, and the Yankees go in there. They're going to beat them up. They're going to beat up the Texas Rangers before they come home, take on the Anaheim Angels on May 25th, 26th, and 27th. They'll have a very interesting homestand to the Yankees the 25th of May through the 30th of May against the Angels and the Astros. But before then, they get 6 very winnable games where they're just going to continue to beat up on people. And this Yankee team that ever since they had been, 9-9, they've only lost 3 games. Think about that. They have gone 19-3. And they're running away and hiding, not just in the American League, right now tied with Boston for first place in the American League, but they are running away in New York City and with all the headlines, because this is very quickly turning into a summer of the Yankees, as a lot of people thought it would be. Well, the Mets, who are supposed to be a nice story and can still be a nice story, are slip-sliding into irrelevancy. That's going to end it here, folks. We want to thank you for joining us here today in the Open Mic program, on the podcast. Remember to follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Open Mic Program, and also on Twitter, @OpenMicNJ. And also like and subscribe right here on the Sports Talk Nation. And let me just pull this up here on the Mets 24/7 Sports. Remember that you can follow the Mets Amazing Clubhouse via 24/7 Sports by going to @Mets247 Sports on Twitter. And that's where you can follow us on Twitter, and then that will link you right to our website on the Mets Amazing Clubhouse. All right, everybody, take care. Remember, like and subscribe right here on the Sports Talk Nation. Take care, everybody. Talk to you next time.